Okay, so this third video is on the third type of market failure we're going to be looking at, called asymmetric information. Asymmetric information is something you probably all experience when you purchase products on eBay, or if you were, which you may not have experienced, but purchasing a second-hand car. It's all about when one party to a transaction has more information about the good or service than another. So sometimes that means the supplier has more information than the buyer, and at other times the buyer may actually have more information than the seller. So in competitive markets, we assume that buyers and sellers have equal information, but in reality, sometimes the buyer or the seller has more information, which can often lead to purchasing adversely and an inefficient allocation of resources. So the first thing that asymmetric information can cause is what we call adverse selection. So adverse selection is when the uninformed party, whether that be the buyer or the seller, purchases in a way that leads to his living standards being reduced. So a good example of this would be in the market for used cars. If you're the buyer of a used car and you purchase a lemon car, or what we call a car that has no engine or that has any mechanical issues with it, then you would have experienced the issue of asymmetric information causing adverse selection. Another example might be that if you are buying jewellery, that you think that you're buying 8 or 9 carat gold, but unfortunately it is not of the quality that you thought it would be. So the supplier has misled you and taken advantage of that asymmetric information, which has led to adverse selection, or you selecting in a manner that has reduced your living standards. So asymmetric information can also occur when the buyer knows more than the seller. So for example, with the market for health insurance or for car insurance, often the buyer will have more information about either the way he drives or his personal health than the seller will. And the problem with that is that the seller doesn't know exactly what price they should charge individual consumers. And what ends up happening is that more risky drivers, and in the case of health insurance, sicker people, are more likely to purchase health insurance or car insurance, which can unfortunately lead to healthy individuals or safe drivers having a premium on their health insurance or car insurance that is higher than they should have. So in essence, this asymmetric information and the seller not being able to find out all the information about the buyer's characteristics actually leads to higher prices for other individuals and therefore a more inefficient allocation of resources. So here are some examples that I want to go through, just talking about how asymmetric information can occur in the free market and why it causes inefficiency. So the first one is the market for used cars. The problem with used cars is it causes inefficiency for two reasons. One, the person that buys the used car, if it's dodgy, obviously that will affect their living standards. And the other problem is that the value of used car, if somebody is trying to sell a good used car, or say we're saying a reputable supplier, they won't be able to get as much money for that product as they should be allowed to because consumers are sceptical. So what this can often lead to is owners of good cars holding on to those cars rather than supplying them to the market. And the problem with that is that you can't take advantage of being able to sell a used car, and there's less good used cars available on the market, which both leads to inefficiency. The same thing with the health insurance example. While the unhealthy person may benefit from getting health insurance, the healthy person is now charged at a higher premium because there are more sick people in that market looking for health insurance. It can also happen with mechanics. If you're getting a mechanic, if there is asymmetric information, you may spend waste a lot of time going around trying to find the best provider for that car, and that leads to inefficiency because you're wasting your time because you are trying to find the most reputable or safest person to get your car fixed. Okay, another example is what we call moral hazard. And moral hazard is when economic agents, so individuals, adjust their behaviour to one that is less efficient from society's point of view. So what that may mean is that a person gets health insurance, for example, they just no longer have to pay if they get injured or sick, so therefore they're more likely to take risks. And I've attached a video at the end of this presentation that looks at just a quick, if you watch the first 2 minutes of a Friends clip where Joey gets health insurance and therefore talks about how he can now cross the road without looking or catch on fire. So while he doesn't have to pay for that cost of getting his hospital bills, society still has to pay for that. And therefore that can lead to an inefficient allocation of resources. It can also happen in the workforce. So once you are employed, obviously the employer doesn't have as much information about your work habits as the employee, and this can lead to individuals getting jobs and they're not working to their optimal amount once they're on a contract. And this can lead to moral hazard. Economic agents adjusting their behaviour, so slacking off at work, because it doesn't hurt them, but it is less efficient from society's point of view. So there's some good examples of moral hazard. When you get health insurance, that you are more likely to take risks. Drivers with insurance are more likely to take risks on the work. And workers, once they've got a job, they are more likely to slacken off. Here are some ways that the private market can try and avoid some of the issues with asymmetric information. So the first one is signalling, and that's when workplaces look at business individuals' previous experience. They will contact referees, looking at where they went to school, all to try and avoid this situation where they hire someone that isn't going to be optimal for their business's efficiency. Screening is another example, and that includes things like checking resumes for mistakes, putting psychological tests on new employees so they can find out what they'd be like in certain situations. Trial periods, so you might put someone on a 6-month trial period, so it turns out if they're not suited to the workplace or they're going to slacken off, that they can be sacked during that period of time. And probably a more extreme one would be putting cameras. There are also private organisations set up, things like Choice and RACV, where people can go online and find out information about products so they're less likely to be deceived and purchase adversely. Just lastly, just a few things, and I've included a few more of these in your booklets, but the last one is government solutions to asymmetric information. So the first one is there's trade practices legislation, which prevents businesses from conducting misleading or deceptive conduct. The businesses that engage in misleading or deceptive conduct can get a fine up to $250,000. The clear way of the government is trying to prevent asymmetric information. Another one would be laws relating to warranties, defective products and product disclosures. So this may mean that businesses selling second-hand cars have to put a warranty on their product, which means that if they are to sell a dodgy car, that there's a certain period of time where the person can get their money back, or that the business will pay for any expenses. And the third one, this is something that's come up a lot more recently, is within employment or contract laws, there's actually now protection for employers that they can fire employees up to 6 months into their contract. So for this first 6 months, the businesses have the power to fire people that aren't working to their potential. There's also, in 2005, there was also what we call the removal of unfair dismissal laws, which basically meant that businesses could fire employees at any time if they weren't working to their potential. Those laws have currently been relaxed a little bit, but they still apply for very small businesses, that they can get rid of employees that aren't working to their potential. That's another way that they can prevent this